Hi everybody, I'm Evening Ransom. Welcome to Evening TV from Character Disturbance by George Simon and Complex PTSD by Pete Walker, of course. Two great books. And what I'm going to start out talking about is defining narcissism, just understanding the continuum and how it works. Because I hear a lot of different things, a lot of discrepancies about it. Some more maybe mainstream channels have like a fringe where they might now and again talk about narcissism or psychological, some in psychology, but it's not their main thing that they talk about. I'm sensing a tone of narcissism's everywhere. It's the catchword, it's the trend of the day. Everybody's talking about it, and things that were perhaps when all this was happening to me 15 years ago, no one had heard of it. Now maybe if it was happening to me in this day and age, other people would be going, oh, that sounds familiar. I've seen this, I've heard of this before, maybe. In understanding the narcissism, again, you understand it on a continuum, right? And we understand that there is healthy narcissism, and everybody has to have healthy narcissism. If we understand that healthy narcissism stays here, and down this way, going unhealthy in this direction is heading toward neuroses. This is where neurotic people live down here, okay? And going this way is personality disorders, okay? So healthy's here, not enough narcissism is down here, too much is down here, okay? And the difference really, it is a continuum of responsibility. It's how much responsibility for the things you do and say you are willing to take. Neurotics take entirely too much responsibility. Everything's their fault. They're the one busy looking for solutions. They're the one, ready to blame themselves for whatever goes wrong. And of course, they're the perfect match to the narcissist who takes entirely too little. When we say the word narcissist, what we're talking about is someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. So a person who is narcissistic is a person who has maybe a little excess narcissism. They're heading down this way. When we say someone's a narcissist or you're a narc, we're talking about someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. Now, this was something I just heard on one of these mainstream interviews too, was that the figures that we're using for how many people have this disorder, I think are really, really skewed. They are way off the mark because, as we know, they don't go into treatment, they don't get diagnosed. If we have 1% of the population testing positive for narcissistic personality disorder, we can just bet that 1% is, probably 1% of the people who have it. So it's, there's a lot more people that would have, that would test as positive for it, that are just not getting tested. And so they seem to lack empathy, they seem to not have an intact conscience, they seem to be awfully self-focused and not caring about my needs and that kind of thing. Then, you don't need to know that they've got NPD or ASPD or whatever. They've got a character disturbance. There's something off about them. They're narcissistic, okay? All of the disorders that we talk about, the 4 cluster B disorders that we talk about, are all down here in the unhealthy narcissism category. They're all pathological narcissism, okay? So none of them are healthy. They're all pathological narcissism. And I have some graphics here I can show you about where they fall, so you can see how that goes. There's also a little bit of a misunderstanding about who is more and who is worse and all that kind of thing. And their symptoms are really just different. But what you have to understand is that everybody has narcissism, okay? So that's the first thing. So when you have a person who's a sociopath or psychopath or whatever, those are not clinical terms. Those are lay person terms. What the real term is antisocial personality disorder. That's the end stage person. That's the person at the far end of the scale. That person has bypassed overt narcissism, NPD, on the way down there. Okay, so that person with ASPD has passed NPD. It trumps NPD. They have gone through that and gone even further. Okay, so the person with NPD doesn't necessarily have ASPD. They can, but they don't necessarily have to. It's the overt narcissist is someone who is, exactly as the name implies, overtly narcissistic. They're not as sneaky, they're not as smooth and slick as the covert narcissist or the sociopath. And there's a little discrepancy here. Some people call the covert narcissist they term that as something that somebody else might call a shy narcissist or an introverted narcissist or something like that. But I keep it pretty simple, and my assessment of it, I think that makes perfect sense to me, is that a covert narcissist is basically a sociopath. A covert narcissist is the one who's not as overtly narcissistic. They're sneakier about it. They come off as a super nice guy and everyone loves them. They're much more likable. You know, you lose empathy, and your real criminal sort of mindset is getting more developed as you go down the scale as well. So a person with overt narcissism is really just so completely self-absorbed that they're not plotting. They're really not plotting against you. They are knee-jerk, they're childish, they feel very entitled to their moods, very entitled to their outbursts. The antisocial person is going to be much sneakier about it. So everything that the overt narcissist has, every one of their entitled traits and all their aggression and their anger and the antisocial person has all of that too. They just hide it. And what's especially scary about the antisocial personality disordered person is that they really do plot. They really do plot and plan. And the other thing is that they also manipulate the overt narcissist. They basically figure out what you want to be, and then they tell you that you're that. They find out what you need, and then they pretend to be that for you. Okay? So there's four corners, and on the one axis is the level of narcissism, and the other is their level of functioning. Okay? So if you have a person who is high functioning and on the low level of narcissism, but they're definitely narcissistic personality disorder. So when we say low, it's still low in the high, so it's still a person who has a narcissistic personality disorder. But there's a lot of people that we know that are doing quite well in society that fit that category, that are high functioning people that have narcissistic personality disorder. Would be a CEO. Maybe just not an extreme version of it. And actually, maybe an extreme version of it, but as long as they're high functioning, the really high functioning, really high level narcissist would be someone who would be like a dictator, would be like a Hitler, or somebody like that, or a cult leader, right? Low functioning, high level are going to be total criminals. That's going to be the criminals, and people that get, those are the ones filling up the jails. And then low level, low functioning would be more of a parasite, someone who just uses people and that kind of stuff. That would be how I would think it would kind of play out. It can look quite different. It can manifest quite differently. That's how it is down here. But we rarely go down and visit the neurotics. And I dare say that we should focus some more attention on the neurotics, because that's where most of us fall, because we didn't have healthy narcissism. We didn't have enough healthy narcissism. And which means that we would end up doubting ourselves. We would have low self-esteem. It made us susceptible to narcissistic abuse. So that makes it worth looking at. In George Simon's book, he had a really great chart here about how to differentiate between the neurotics and the character disordered person. He has this graph. And so traits for the neurotic person would be: anxiety is a major factor in their symptoms and in their self-presentation. Character disorder, anxiety plays a minor role, or it's problematically lacking. They're not anxious enough. They have too much confidence about the things that they're doing. Neurotics, conscience is very well developed, even overactive. Character disordered, conscience is underdeveloped or lacking. Neurotics, excessive guilt or shame. Character disorder, insufficient guilt and shame. And neurotics, self-defeating coping patterns, and character disordered coping patterns meant to be self-advancing to victimize others. One of the criteria that made us so vulnerable was the fact that we didn't have protection, that we didn't have people close to us that loved us, protected us, believed in us, all of that. And I know from my own personal experience that one one of the things that my ex-husband saw right away was he saw that my family would scapegoat me. And he saw that when the time came, he would be able to use them. They wouldn't protect me and they wouldn't defend me. He saw that the minute that he knew me, I was, you know, 30 in my 30s and shocked that it was happening. And as a neurotic person, I would much sooner, much more comfortable with the idea that I could be wrong than with the idea that you didn't love me, that my parents didn't love me. That was unbearable to think of. But my being wrong, that I'm not seeing this right, that was perfectly fine. The neurotic kind of gets left out of this conversation a lot of the time, and it shouldn't, because that's all of us. And the good news is, the really good news is that neurotics are very amenable to change. They're very amenable to change. And the other good news is that psychotherapy is all focused on the neurotic. It's all built for neurotic people. Because once upon a time, that was mostly the problems that society had. Society has changed, and part of the reason for the epidemic is that society has changed, and psychiatry has not kept up with it. The study of psychology has not kept up with it. Because the other problem is that neurotic people, they're miserable in and of themselves, and they're very amenable to change, but they're not hurting anybody. They're not out there hurting anybody. But personality disorder people are the ones causing all kinds of damage to individual lives, to families, to businesses, just total destruction, and they are not seeking treatment, and they're not amenable to treatment. But one thing that is unique about George Simon is that he actually does treat them, and he says it's not impossible to do. It's just that it takes a whole shift in mindset, and it's a refreshing shift. It makes a lot of sense. And that's what he's made his whole career out of doing, was actually treating personality disordered people or character disturbed people, and being successful at it. Alrighty, so that is the narcissistic continuum, and you are going to be down in the era of not healthy narcissism unless you've healed, unless you've done a lot of work on yourself. You're going to be down this direction towards the neurotic side. And the good news with that is that that is very amenable to treatment, very, very curable and fixable and all that stuff. But it's not a term that you don't hear us talking about it very often. That I don't hear that term around at all. We hear codependent a lot, but not everybody that is neurotic is necessarily codependent. And the other problem with codependent is that the narcissist is also codependent. So it's kind of a confusing term to use. So I don't know why we're not using neurotic. Maybe people think it's insulting to be called neurotic. I don't know why, but that is the scientific term. Is that is neurosis. Thumbs up, and let me know what your experience is with the differences between an overt and a covert narcissist or a sociopath, if you have any experiences like that. Alrighty, thanks a lot, you guys. Bye-bye.